A truly good man is not aware of his goodness, and is therefore good. A foolish man tries to be good, and is therefore not good. A truly good man does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone. A foolish man is always doing, yet much remains to be done. When a truly kind man does something, he leaves nothing undone. When a just man does something, he leaves a great deal to be done. When a disciplinarian does something and no one responds, he rolls up his sleeves in an attempt to enforce order. Therefore, when Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is kindness. When kindness is lost, there is justice. When justice is lost, there is ritual. Now ritual is the husk of faith and loyalty, the beginning of confusion. Knowledge of the future is only a flowery trapping of Tao. It is the beginning of folly. Therefore, the truly great man dwells on what is real and not what is on the surface, on the fruit and not the flower. Therefore, accept the one and reject the other. Yesterday, we focused a lot on the first few lines of chapter 38 from the Tao Te Ching. Today, we're going to focus a bit more on the middle and end. And for those of you who noticed, yes, I did use a different translation of chapter 38 for this video than I used for yesterday's video. This is intentional because I like the added perspective of a second translation, especially with this chapter in particular. With that in mind, let's take a look at these lines in the middle of the chapter. Therefore, when Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is kindness. When kindness is lost, there is justice. When justice is lost, there is ritual. Now ritual is the husk of faith and loyalty, the beginning of confusion. I've seen other translations where this goodness that comes about when we lose the Tao is translated as virtue or righteousness. It can be thought of, if you will, as a person's opinions and distinctions about what is right and what is wrong. Certainly virtue and goodness are not bad things in and of themselves. It would probably be much better to have a society of virtuous people than a society of people that observe no moral boundaries whatsoever. However, virtue, or a person's opinion of what is right and wrong, does have its limits. After all, not everybody agrees about what is right and wrong. All across civilizations, there does seem to be a sort of general moral code of things a person ought and ought not to do. Stealing, for example, does seem to be universally unacceptable by pretty much all moral codes. However, most moral codes around the world and throughout time also seem to have some gray areas where actions that would normally be outlawed are given allowance under certain circumstances. For example, is stealing wrong if one is stealing back something that was stolen from them in the first place? Violence against other people is another example of something that pretty much all moral codes disallow. However, these same moral codes usually make exceptions if one is forced to use violence to protect oneself or one's family. Although some things may seem pretty black and white in theory, there often ends up being a lot of gray areas in practice. People are also very good at justifying all kinds of acts as being virtuous, even to themselves. One of my passions is studying history, and let me tell you, if any of you guys get into studying the French Revolution, you will simply have to spend some time with my old friend, Maximilien Robespierre. I use the word friend in only a flippant sense, of course, because man oh man, this guy was a serious piece of work. Maximilien Robespierre was probably the biggest of the bunch that brought us the Terror, which is a name for the period of the French Revolution where you couldn't hardly make a joke without being sent to have your head chopped off. In the early days of the revolution, Robespierre seemed alright. He came onto the scene as a skilled lawyer, anxious to serve his fellow man, and to play his part in what looked to be a new era of liberty and equality for Europe. He tirelessly advocated for causes such as universal suffrage, the discontinuation of feudal privileges held by stuffy aristocrats that refused to pay their share in taxes, even the abolition of French involvement in the slave trade. He earned the nickname the Incorruptible because of his uncompromising dedication to virtue, even in the face of ridicule and opposition from his peers. Robespierre had an ideal of a country that was motivated primarily by virtue, which he called the Republic of Virtue. However, as time went on, and Robespierre suddenly found himself one of the most powerful men in France, because things moved very quickly in the French Revolution, it became apparent that the Republic of Virtue he envisioned for his country was just not panning out. Peasant mobs sought to take hold of the revolution through violent uprisings and protests, while wars with other European powers threatened to crush the revolution from the outside. Paranoia of anti-revolutionary plots reached a fever pitch. And in the midst of all this, we get Robespierre's version of the line in the Tao Te Ching that talks about the disciplinarian rolling up his sleeves to enforce order. Political executions didn't start or end with Robespierre, but boy oh boy did he give them their heyday. Now, some of these people he had guillotined probably were anti-revolutionary conspirators, but especially towards the end, the killing got more and more indiscriminate. People started getting executed for crimes such as pocket-picking or meeting under suspicious circumstances. One group of nuns was executed for the crime of living together communally. Public support, which had once rallied around Robespierre, now began to wane as it became clear that he intended to massacre his way to his Republic of Virtue, whatever that meant. Finally, the people turned on Robespierre, and through a combination of political conspiracy and mob action, he was left stripped of power, gruesomely injured, and soon after, he was fed to Madame la Guillotine himself. In attempting to reach his Republic of Virtue by force, Robespierre lost whatever virtue he had ever had. This story has always intrigued me because it serves as such a chilling cautionary tale. We see here, among many other things, a rather extreme example of what happens when people are left to their own distinctions of right and wrong and attempt to impose them by force. The tale of the incorruptible Robespierre shows us just how corruptible human beings really are. Again, it's not that virtue is bad in and of itself. It's just that our ideas of right and wrong are so hard to separate from other factors, such as our political ideals, our upbringing, our preferences, and even our own naked self-interest. Therefore, when Tao is lost and goodness or virtue takes over, it is certainly better than nothing, but it is not ideal, because it places our fate and the fate of other people up to our own flawed individual perceptions of what is good and bad. If we lose goodness or virtue, the next level is kindness. Once again, kindness certainly is not a bad thing in and of itself, but we will not always do the right thing simply by trying to be kind to people. This is a lower law and has a lower level of positive output. Lower than this is a focus on justice. Certainly justice ought to be observed, but without being tempered by mercy, wisdom, and intuition, justice becomes a cold, calculating force that can be turned toward atrocity at a moment's notice. People don't usually hurt each other for no reason. Whenever people go to war, either on a national or a personal level, they almost always do so with a sense of having been somehow wronged. But if we spend our entire lives trying to get our own from people who we think have wronged us, our lives will have no room for contentment or peace. Once justice goes out the window, we are left only with ritual. Ritual is a part of life. It gives a sense of rhythm and safety, and is valuable for impressing certain lessons upon us over a long period of time, as long as we can keep in mind the reason for the ritual. But ritual alone is vastly inadequate for producing a good society or a good life. Civilizations that base their morality solely on ritual have never thrived. Rituals often begin as a way of teaching a lesson or guiding a person's actions. But the problem with rituals is that it is so easy for the point of the ritual to become lost in the observation of the ritual itself. Therefore, a focus on rituals is the beginning of confusion. The obsessive observation of dead rituals is one hallmark feature of a civilization in decline. Once again, as I hope I've made clear, it's not that virtue, kindness, justice, or ritual are bad. It's just that they are increasingly inadequate replacements for closeness with the Tao, and with the ability to feel and respond to its subtle pushes and pulls. Quietness, softness, an ability to put our desires aside, and a responsiveness to intuition will allow us to do right naturally. These substitutes are only ways of trying to force ourselves and others to do something that cannot be achieved by force. If we can approach the Tao with willing and open hearts, we will become virtuous, kind, and just anyway. Focus on the one, and you get the rest thrown in. Focus on the others, and you get none of it. If you have any thoughts about this, be sure to leave a comment. And if you enjoy these kinds of topics, check out the Discord, where we discuss this kind of stuff every day. Link in the description of the video. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow for chapter 38. Peace and blessings.